Zos chokas haTorah. This is the rule. This is the law. This is the fundamental principle upon which the Torah is based. You take a cow, a red one, has to have specific qualities, was never used for any work. We burn it, we take the ashes, we mix it, we spray it on those who are impure, and that somehow makes them pure. This is a very unusual ritual. Some very specific details. Chazal say that the other nations would try to use this as a way of laughing at Klal Yisrael. Like, look what you guys are doing. This makes no sense. On what level, in what world can you make sense of this? And so, this in general is a very important principle. That anything that the Creator would demand of us, naturally, by our natural intuition, we know, it needs to make sense. Because the same one who created the brain is talking to the brain. So the two should go together, like a hand and a glove. If something doesn't fit, something doesn't feel right, then they're not coming from the same manufacturer. And so even the Goyim understood this. Even the Goyim understood that the intelligence that creates, of course, wouldn't create something that doesn't make sense, because that would offend intelligence. And intelligence is the one that's creating. It wouldn't offend itself. And so they would ask, why would the intelligence ask you to do something that doesn't seem intelligent at all? Chazal give us answers to this rule, to understanding what's behind the ritual. It relates to the Egel. It relates to the level Klal Yisrael was on. Klal Yisrael was in a level where they couldn't fully grasp the nature of what they were experiencing. And because they couldn't fully grasp the nature of what they were experiencing, every new neshama that comes into that world, that comes into that reality, is going to have to struggle with trying to understand reality. And this struggle eventually removes a certain part, a certain drive, a certain tendency within that soul, until it can find peace within reality. And so every soul that comes in, this cow, the red cow, is representative of the Midas Adin, that's in charge when we don't understand the nature of our experience. And because of the Midas Adin, everybody that comes into this planet is getting tested. Tested in a way that wasn't the intention of how we were designed. The intention was that we should be given a version of the truth that allows us to follow what we are told and be safe and realize the experience that we were designed to have. But when we misunderstand reality, those instructions are not available. And so by the time we understand what's going on, we're looking back at decades of our life. And even then, it's very hard to really understand what's going on. We don't really know if we understand what's going on. We don't know if we're seeing the full picture. We don't know what else we're missing. And so, this caused the wisdom to dress up in a way that it never was supposed to dress up in. But the situation required. The situation required that the wisdom dress up until it almost doesn't look like wisdom anymore. Because wisdom is power. And power brings responsibility. And that means that when people do not understand reality, if they have power, the situation can be very dangerous. And this has been proven throughout history. People who had too much power but didn't understand the nature of reality, they caused a lot of damage to humanity. And so, Zois chukas haTorah. Zois is the nefesh. The soul, the human soul that comes into the world is called Zois, this one. This one is the chok of the Torah. Everything that's in the Torah is related to this one. If you want to understand why the Torah is so specific on so many things, look at the nefesh and see if it's specific about many things. In the Navi it says, they used to swear, Chai Hashem, Asher asa lanu es hanefesh hazois. They used to swear by the life force of the Creator that created for us this nefesh. Ma'is Hashem hois hazois, hi niflas beineinu. This nefesh comes from somewhere high, from someone who designed it to be the way that it is. It's wondrous in our eyes. We can't understand it. But we see it's there, we see it's operating. It's alive. Zois chukas haTorah. Zois is the reason for everything that's in the Torah. If you want to understand the Torah, try to understand Zois. Try to understand what is happening inside of you and around you. And then you'll understand the Torah. Because that's the reality that we're dealing with. That's the only reality that we're dealing with. That's what we need to understand in order to be able to have the experience correctly. So Zois chukas haTorah, you take something that makes the impure pure, and yet that same thing makes the pure impure. The one who's using it to clean those who have gotten themselves caught in the other side, the side where they don't like themselves. So they come to get cleansed, and the priest who is doing the cleansing, he becomes impure. And so this is the underlying principle of the Torah. Zois chukas haTorah. That the same thing, the same concept, the same idea that for some person is above them and takes them high, another person is in another place. For them it's low. Everybody according to their level, everybody according to their perception of what they're experiencing. But whenever we interact with something below us, it affects our energy, it affects us immediately. We come into contact with things, with ideas, with emotions that are different than our nature. They still have an impact on us. And so the Torah has many levels of understanding, and for one person a certain level is going up, for another person that same level is going down. Because the goal is not the words or the meaning of the words. The goal is, what is it doing to your biology? If your biology is at a place where it's tuned into very subtle realities, then a more gross interpretation will bring you down to that vibration, will bring you down to that reality, will make you create in that reality. Because this is the nature of the soul. It's capable of all realities. But wherever we dress her up, that's what we have. That's what we become. That's what we are. To the extent that we can be. What we really are, we already are and we always will be. And that can never be affected regardless of what we experience or we do. But to the extent that we're trying to create in this world, because this is why we came to this world, what we create biologically is what we've become. From what place can we create? And so the Torah is the ladder to keep climbing up towards the realization of the true unity. The true unity means that the soul is completely united with what's happening. It never has any resistance to anything that happened or might happen, because it's aligned. And this is something that's happening inside of the body. It's a realization. It's not related to the events or the circumstances. It's how we instruct ourselves to respond to the events and the circumstances. So this is the chukas haTorah. The Torah can mean whatever the human heart gives it meaning, and each one has been giving it meaning according to their heart. And so when we give it the wrong meaning, then all who come in contact with it become impure. They become distant from reality. They get into conflict with reality. Conflict that doesn't exist. There's no conflict. But the mind is at conflict. The mind is in conflict with itself, with the one who made it, because the interpretation of the words, the heart that was interpreting the words, the heart creates in its own image. So this fundamental rule of the Torah, this is what gave the Torah all its different meanings throughout all the generations. Every generation experienced the same words in a very, very different way. Completely different experience based on the same words. So if we have the right heart, then the Torah becomes meaningful. The Torah becomes our friend, a benefit to us. If we have the wrong heart, the Torah is our biggest enemy. We'll see all the evil in the Torah. This is why so much violence has been perpetrated in the name of religion. It's not because of what the text is saying, it's because of the hearts that were interpreting the text according to the darkness that they were experiencing. So when we have the right heart, then we see in the Torah, we see in the events, we see in people, we see the beautiful things that are always there. There's so much beauty happening everywhere, but most of us are blind, we cannot see. Because the mind is at conflict. When the mind is in conflict, then there's no beauty. It doesn't matter that the senses are observing beauty, they don't get recorded by the mind. The mind is busy, the mind is distracted, the mind is somewhere else in the past, or fighting off an imagined future. The human heart is the king on this planet, but it certainly doesn't feel like a king. It doesn't feel like a king because nobody gives it the respect that a king deserves. It still decides everything. It's still the one that makes all the decisions. It simply doesn't get the respect. And because it doesn't get the respect, it cannot perform its function appropriately. A king needed to be respected so that he can feel the way that he needs to feel, so that he can run a country. It takes a lot of energy to run a country. The heart is the king of the planet. It's running the planet. It takes a lot of energy to run this planet. But the heart is not given the respect that it deserves. It has to fight for its survival, as if it's doing a crime simply by being here. Zoi Schikas HaTorah. This wondrous being that resides in the human heart, she is the reason for every rule. This is the reason why there is a Torah. If not for her, there would be no Torah. If there wasn't any of our species around, then obviously there would be no Torah. They wouldn't give Torah to the monkeys. And so only because this wondrous spirit has such a tremendous power, this power needed to be protected. And the protection was hiding the wisdom from those who would use it against the human spirit. And yet somehow delivered the message to the spirit that deserves to know it. The spirit that's qualified. Qualified because it has surrendered to reality. It's no longer an enemy of its own kind. So this is the underlying principle. This is the underlying principle for everything, every form of instruction, any form of text, any form of speech. The underlying principle is it's supposed to serve the spirit that dwells in the human hearts. Otherwise it's violating the code of reality. The code that's ingrained in all of us. We cannot run from it. It's in our nature. We ourselves are recording everything that we're doing, and when we violate the code, we know it. And that's more than enough. So everything that we create has to be for the benefit of the human spirit. Because she is the king of the universe. She, the collective, we, the individuals, it's the same thing. It's the same force, it's the same power, it's the same being. So she is the purpose of all. If it's not serving the human spirit, then it's false by its very nature. It's false because it violates the truth. The truth is that everything that a human creates should be for the benefit of humanity. That's the natural truth. So this is the rule, this is the principle upon which the wise built this wondrous castle that humanity has moved into through various religions, various ways of misunderstanding the same truth. Everyone is searching for the same truth. The truth of the human spirit. Who is it that dwells within us, and what does it want? Everyone wants to know that answer. But various people have found different ways of getting closer to that answer, or at least experiencing an experience that made them feel that they were closer to that answer. Experiencing an experience that made them not care whether they know the answer, which sometimes is even better. And so all religions are trying to solve the same problem. The problem that it cannot be. It cannot be that a reasonable creator must be reasonable because he creates such wonderful work. doesn't give proper instruction to those who want to abide by his reality. And so this is the underlying cause of everything that took place. This is the underlying cause of the human struggle, is the misunderstanding of the human spirit. And when the human spirit is misunderstood, there are energies that are unfriendly that start forming, and then there's aggression, there's violence in order to release that energy. This is part of our nature. This is how we were designed, so that we can understand our place of balance. We can understand what's driving the truth. There's a reality to us. There's a reality that's quite basic, but to us it can seem very complex. When we don't understand it, it certainly seems very complex. And so all instruction is here to right this wrong. This is the purpose of all of it. And none of the attempts so far have succeeded. The closest we ever got to realizing that truth was when Klal Yisrael left Egypt. But since then, there were many other attempts. In the time of Shlomo HaMelech, we were close. In the time of Chizkiyahu HaMelech, we were close. But none of them succeeded. And the attempts became more and more void of true transformation as the time in exile started building. Because exile makes people heavy, makes it very difficult for them to change. When people are free, they're ready to go to any reality that seems reasonable in a very quick period of time. But when people are in exile, it's very difficult for them to change their behaviors and their thought patterns, because people become heavy from suffering. People become dry. People lose their appetite for life. And so the longer in exile, the less meaningful the transformations, unless there's a very high soul, a very deep soul that comes and reveals its light, and that makes a transformation even in exile. But then, because it's exile, it's very easy for it to cool back down. And people suffer and they forget again what was being said. The excitement gets lost. And this we saw, like in Tzfat by the Arizal or by the Baal Shem Tov, where there was tremendous light. People, generations after, were shining from this light. But still, it cooled down very quickly, and then it became just a shell of its former self, just like everything else. Just like all the other attempts that failed, the light returns to darkness the more people are going through suffering. And so the goal of the Torah is to bring light to the human heart, because when the human heart shines, then the world shines. It's really that simple. When the human heart will shine, the world will shine. Everything in it will be pleasant. Because the ones who are currently making it unpleasant are humans. And so this is the underlying principle of the Torah. This is why the Torah has yes and no. It's not because of any external reality. It's because of what's inside of us. Inside of us, there are yeses and there are nos. And we want to understand those yeses and those nos. We want to understand where they're coming from and how much of it is real, how much of it is what we made up because of what we observed, and how much of it is really within our nature. What's within our nature, we don't want to interfere with. What we created because of observation, we most probably want to remove completely. We don't want to add to the lens of reality at all, because we're not qualified. No one is qualified. Life is bigger than the human mind. Life creates the human mind. The human mind cannot create life. The goal of the Torah is to bring light to the human heart, and through it to the entire world. And it does so through playing with the mind, through the eyes. Playing with the mind so that the mind can realize itself. The mind should question. The mind should try to understand so that the mind can develop. And eventually, the mind can start asking the real questions, and then it will look to those same words to find answers to new questions that it never thought about before. And those words will continue to answer those questions, and then new questions will arise. And those new questions, again, will go to the same words to be answered. Because we're developing the mind. The mind is the one giving the meaning, based on the emotion within the heart. With the correct emotion, the heart will give the right instructions to the mind, and then the mind will find sweet meaning. If the heart has a sour emotion, then it will give the wrong instruction to the mind, and the mind will find a bitter meaning. The same words. So eventually the heart, if it wants to enjoy its learning, needs to become sweet. Otherwise it's going to get punished with bad meanings. And these meanings allow the brain and the heart to evolve and to unite, to realize the nature of each other. The nature that's being brought out min hakoach el hapoel, from potential into manifestation, as we're listening to the words, as we're reading the words. And this is our punishment, and this is our reward. Everybody receives in accordance with their own attributes. So this is the underlying principle of the Torah. This is how the Torah intends to refine our hearts. But ultimately, we're looking at the heart, we're looking out for the heart. And so, while we're doing what we're doing with the Torah, we don't want to offend the heart directly, because that would defeat the whole purpose. That would send a message that we really don't understand what we're trying to do. And if we don't understand what we're trying to do, we certainly won't accomplish what we're trying to do. Because the meanings that we're going to find in the words are going to be based on what we're trying to do. Which part of the story we're going to remember, which part of what's being said is going to touch us the most deeply. each one on their own. Every nuance can become, for one person, the entire experience, based on what's already inside of their minds, inside of their hearts. And so it's activating different areas, and it's bringing out what's inside of us. So we can learn better how to be ourselves. Because that's ultimately what we're here to do, is to be ourselves. But we need to know how to be ourselves. What does it mean to be ourselves? And if we're not receiving that information from the appropriate channel, then we have to find it from within. It's much harder, but it's the only option we have. And if we succeed, it's a more rewarding path when we discover on our own. So may we all have the merit to learn how to liberate our own heart. And if we liberate our hearts, then it will spread. Nobody will want to miss out on liberating their heart if they knew it was really available. And so, through that, the collective will be liberated. And that will lead us to the final redemption. May it happen soon.